Mohammed Hanif is a Karachi-based journalist and novelist. After working in London for 12 years, he returned home to Pakistan in 2008. His first novel, A Case of Exploding Mangoes, is a satirical take on events surrounding the death of Pakistan's infamous military dictator, General Zia al-Haq. He's in Australia to promote his second novel, Our Lady of Al-Asbati, and he joined me in the studio earlier. Mohammed Hanif, thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Back in 2008, you decided to pack up after 12 years living in London to move the family back to Pakistan. Now, friends and family thought that you were crazy. How's it turned out? Was it a good move?
Well, there are good days and there are bad days, like in every city. Like most economic migrants, I had left Pakistan thinking that I'm going for 3 years because I had got a job with the BBC there, and it was a 3-year contract, and you promise everybody that I'm going for 3 years. After 3 years I'll be back, here's my stuff, take care of it, and that's what I had done. And before we knew, I'd already been there 10-11 years, and I had a child, had got a house, got a promotion in my job, had written a novel. And you kind of, sort of say that, oh, wait a minute, this is not what I really wanted in my life. I want to go back and live in Karachi. And I was, throughout my time in London, I really loved London. But I was also homesick at the same time. And I've met too many migrants in Europe and in America who are retired and old and sitting there and talking about their little village and still missing it. And I had this idea that I don't want to be one of those sad people. So now that I have the opportunity to move back, I should. And it's been all right so far. My son, who was born in London, he loves it. My wife, who was a struggling actor in London, is now a famous star in Pakistan. And I've written another book, and I've met up with lots of old friends and made some new ones.
The Economist paints Karachi as a city at war. That's how they described it a couple of months ago. Is it that bad?
Well, as I said, there are good days and there are bad days. So usually kind of on Tuesdays it goes to war with itself. I don't know why. And then it gets better. It is a huge city. It's a city of 18 million people. And it attracts immigrants from all over, not just from Pakistan, but from all over South Asia. So you'll have Nepalese, Burmese, lots of Afghans. So there are huge problems, there are infrastructure issues. So it can go through these violent convulsion after every few weeks. But then it settles down and people start doing the mundane things that they do in big cities.
At the moment in Pakistan, there's a standoff between the judiciary and the government. The judiciary wants the Prime Minister to write to Swiss authorities, asking them to reopen corruption allegations into the President. What's going on?
Well, it's a long story. Pakistan's Supreme Court has been saying this to the government for a very long time because there are corruption charges against the President, but the President, being an elected president, should have immunity from these kinds of proceedings till the time he is in the office. Supreme Court says that no, they won't talk about it. I think the reason is that Pakistan has had 2 long spells of military rule, and that's why none of the institutions, the parliament, the judiciary, none of them actually really know what their function is. So they always try and overstep. The same judiciary, some of the same judges in the past have hanged elected prime ministers, have sent others into exiles, sanctioned military coups, supported military coups. But now that they've got this freedom and they've come back into power through a popular movement. So I think sometimes they get this idea that they will do the work of the police as well, and they'll do the work of the parliament as well. And parliament, on the other hand, is probably going to be hopefully one of Pakistan's first parliament that is going to complete its tenure, and we're likely to have an election. So I think they're also in a bit of a panic about that.
Is the judiciary right, though, to push for President Zardari to be investigated? Because these are very serious allegations that he got kickbacks from Swiss companies back in the day when Benazir Bhutto was the president of Pakistan.
He should be investigated like everybody else. But we also must remember that when these charges were framed against him. He spent 11 years being investigated, and most of this time he was in prison, being actually kept as a hostage with the help of the judiciary by a military dictator. So he's already kind of spent 11 years in prisons, and none of these charges were ever proven. So yes, if the judiciary feels that he should be investigated, he should be investigated. We should also keep the fact in the mind that he is elected president.
This standoff has already led to one Prime Minister, Yusuf Razif Gilani, having to resign, or having to be sacked, really, for being in contempt of the Supreme Court in June. What's likely to happen to the latest Prime Minister?
Well, I think he's already lasted longer than people were expecting. So it's becoming a bit of a farce, because the Supreme Court sends one Prime Minister home, the Parliament elects another one, and he does exactly the same thing that the last Prime Minister did. So I think there are saner voices in Pakistan which is saying that, look, we're very close to this government finishing its term. We already appointed an election commissioner. So the same thing to do now would be that announce the next elections and bring an end to this joke, basically.
The Bureau of Investigative Journalism in London has released some figures that show that since 2004, the US has launched over 330 drone strikes inside Pakistan, resulting in around 3,000 deaths. And they estimate including up to 850 civilians. Pakistan's High Commissioner to London says these strikes are weakening democracy and risk pushing people towards extremist groups. Do you agree with that analysis?
I think I do tend to agree with that. Not just that it's weakening democracy in Pakistan. I think it's creating all kinds of other moral and legal and ethical issues. Because what exactly is happening is, how people see it is that there is somebody sitting in a small town in the United States with a little remote control. And he's trying to make a decision about somebody who's moving around in northern Pakistan. And he's going to decide whether this guy is guilty or not. And then he's going to take a hit. And as this report shows, and as people have proven in the past, that these guesses are not very educated. So not just in those areas, and just the idea of living in a place where these death machines hover 24/7, sort of over the whole area, that kind of, causes all kinds of, I think, psychological damage. You can never, ever justify that. How can you hit a civilian, a woman or a child, just because they happen to live in a street or in a village where some militants might or might not be hiding?
Is it radicalizing young men in Pakistan?
I think it's doing not just that. It's creating a whole new generation of people who will grow up thinking that this is what happened to us, and now we want revenge. And it's creating, as I said, all kinds of other problems. For example, where the drone attacks are happening, where the militants or Taliban who control that area, they have said that they will not allow their children to be given the polio vaccine. Now, polio was about to be eradicated from Pakistan like everywhere else. Now, this is a strange logic. As a Pakistani, as a citizen, I think this is quite moronic, that you're saying that if you don't stop the drone attacks, if you don't stop killing our kids, then we will kill them ourselves, or we will allow them to become, sort of handicapped because of polio. We will not allow the polio vaccine. Now, you see what kind of complexities, what kind of, sort of silly and behavior this situation is leading to.
The US Defense Secretary Leon Panetta says these attacks are aimed not only to protect US citizens from strikes, but also the Pakistani citizens who've been targets of attacks by Al-Qaeda and their allies.
I don't agree with that point of view. Yes, Pakistanis every day are being targeted by the militants in Pakistan. Not just Pakistani civilians, Pakistan army is also being targeted by these militants. And there is a problem within Pakistan, I would say, that there's not enough there are not enough people who condemn these attacks. When militants belong to Pakistan, they attack Pakistani citizens, Pakistani armed forces. You don't hear the kind of noise when you hear when a drone hits a village and kills some people who may or may not be militants. But what has happened here is that we've ended up into this downward spiral of violence, where we think that the only solution that's left is that Americans will hit the Taliban, and Taliban will hit Pakistan, and one day, somehow, through some miracle, we'll find this solution.
I wanted to raise the issue of satire in Pakistan. You write satirically in your novels, and satire is covered a bit on political news channels in Pakistan. How hard is it in a country that has strict blasphemy laws, that has an overbearing military? How hard is it to use satire in Pakistan?
I think Pakistani nation has survived. One of the reasons that it survived is that it's always had a bit of a sense of humor. It has gone through these long periods of censorship, for example, during the military rules, when you couldn't say anything in the newspapers, there was nothing on TV. So what people did was they would stand on the street corners and make jokes about the generals and about the mullahs and about everything.
And that's what you saw when you were growing up in your village?
Yes, and that still goes on. And now that we've had this explosion of media in Pakistan, for the first few years it was, sort of exactly like this, talking heads like me and yourself, like, sort of sitting on these TV talk shows and talking about everything. And after a few years, of course, it got boring because these pundits had their limits. So you could say something, let's say, about a politician, but you couldn't say anything about a general. You could, sort of name a certain religious leader, but you couldn't question somebody else's belief. So I think and that's when they started bringing in these stand-up comics, basically, or comedians who kind of were working in commercial theatre and had their own shows. So they started getting them in as political pundits. So it has, I think, lightened up things a bit. There are people who don't approve of it. They think that they're trivializing sort of national issues. But I think sometimes there's wisdom in what they say.
And how do the politicians and the mullahs and the generals feel about being mocked by these satirists on political talk shows? I
think, strangely enough, most of them actually accepted it, and most of them actually sit there and wait that the day they're not being satirized, or somebody's not cracking a joke about them, they feel left out.
Mohammed Hanif, thanks very much for coming in tonight.
Thank you.